So very quickly, our initial project was to understand the landscape of the Pyrenees, the mountain range between Spain and France. And in order to do so, we realized that we needed an historical approach. The current mountains are characterized by overpresence of conservation policies. 60% of those districts are covered by parks. The recommendation of the European Union doesn't exceed 12% per country. So those mountains are bearing the brunt of the conservation effort of the countries. So we were interested in understanding why that happened. In order to do so, we conducted an historical research that pushed us 200 years into the past, and we developed a chronology of public policies that had affected the territory. There were public policies that ended up with a lot of territory belonging to the state, different ways of territorial expropriation and territorialization of the state. The last of these ways were these conservation policies that started with some exceptions, but late 60s, early 70s. So our goal then was to understand how that happened, but also to understand the rationale behind it. I'm not going to go in detail into this genealogy of policies, but suffice to say that most of them were characterized by the confrontation between scientific knowledge and local knowledge, and by the fact that the scientific knowledge was supporting the state effort to take control. Basically by saying that local agriculture generated erosion, or local practices were resulting in the extinction of valuable species. And so the rationality was common across 200 years. So most of our work has been about understanding this genealogy of policies, but at the tail end of our work, we ended up trying to question this rationality, especially the one used by the managers of these conservation policies. And to do so, what we did was to try to analyze their social construction of the animal species that they were managing, especially connected to the endangered species list and extinction. And we went through several of the animals, the species that they were protecting and managing, trying to understand how they were managing them. Being the official discourse that they were the scientists and they didn't know how to manage the integrity of this ecosystem. So we went through the program of reintroduction of the brown bear that got recently extinguished, and it was done with Slovenian bears. We went through the beaver program, not the beaver program, but the beaver controversy and the river otter controversy. We work also on the comparison between the management of elk, roe deer, red deer, and mouflon, type of wild goat. And it was interesting to discover that although the overarching discourse was ecological integrity, what we were talking really was about designing environments. And why? For instance, let me give you a few examples while I still have time. The local elders were asking us, ask the managers of the parks, why are they introducing the elk? None of us have ever seen elk here. So I went to the park and asked them, so the locals tell me that there were no elk here. And the biologists would say, yes, they were. So when they were getting extinguished? In the 16th century. And so they had chosen to replicate a 16th century type of environment. Of course, the choices are multiple. You can even go further back in the past or to the future, whatever you decide. So some people have called that, restoration ecology has called it postmodern ecology, in the sense that you're reinventing continuously. So for instance, the wild goat, which was introduced in the 60s because most of these areas were first hunting reserves, now is hunted to extinction because it's not local, it's not endemic. And it's competing with the chamois or the roe deer. On the other hand, marmots that were introduced by the French in the 40s, 50s, and now they're on the thousands on the top of the mountains, are left there because do not compete with local species, and they're cute. Literally, I mean, that is the quote. The brown bear is also an interesting example. It's about restoring the integrity of the ecosystem. Well, the Spanish authorities that manage the brown bears that are left in the west of the country didn't want to let any of those bears go, so they went to Slovenia, which genetically speaking is a different type of bear. and they brought it anyway. Interestingly enough, at the same time, the king of Spain was traveling to Romania to hunt brown bears, while the locals that were completely in opposition to the program was led by France and had no consensus, let's say. 60% of the population of France were in favor of it, 90% of the population of the French Pyrenees were against it. The final nice example is the beavers. The beavers were reintroduced at night by an environmental group. They were left there and they actually blossomed. At the same time, the state is expending millions, literally millions, to reintroduce the river option. But now the state is expending thousands of euros to get rid of the beavers because the state has a monopoly on reintroduction. The big quote saying, if we don't do that, someone can bring a couple of wolves to Madrid, let them go, and we'll have to protect them. So it's not about ecology, it's about politics, it's about aesthetics, it's about deciding which kind of environment do you have. And again, the power is behind the scientific model, while locals are struggling. That being said, in the last 20 years, since we started our research, things have changed quite a bit. The agricultural system has completely collapsed, and locals were completely against all these animals. They were actually proud of having get rid of them. I mean, they knew the guy that killed the last bear, and he was a local hero, right? But nowadays, this attitude is changing because this economic system has shifted completely towards leisure, towards ecotourism. So they're actually making money out of it. So there's still resistance, but not nearly as much as what we saw 15